Hello, good evening and welcome to PM Express. My name is Stephen Enti, as always. Now, the question I'm asking tonight is this a show of solidarity or mere politics to garner votes? Raging controversy and public outcry appears to have whittled down as the president moves quickly to avert what can be described as national acrimony and condemnation over gargantuan pay hikes for the executives and the legislature. But can this act of parliament be vetoed as President Mahama directs the withholding of any payment of the new salaries and calls for a parliamentary review? Is this suggestive that Parliament acted on the blind side of the executive? If so, why is government failing to comment on this matter of national interest as the secrecy heightens? When did the president know about the increase? I guess we have a right to know. And why the lack of transparency? Is this review a mere show of politics and that we're likely to see these new salaries implemented after the elections anyway? Should the president speak to the issue? That's something we want to know. And is a full disclosure necessary? Stay here for the post-mortem analysis. You can join us via text 1760. Post your comments or question suggestions here on our Facebook wall. And our Facebook is facebook.com/Joy News on TV. You can also follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/Joy News on TV. Our Twitter handle again is Joy News on TV. My guest tonight is Kofi Bentil, who is Deputy Director of Imani. Later on in the show, we will get onto the phone line to speak to Deputy Majority Leader Rashid Pelpo and then Minority Leader Osei Mensah-Bonsu to get some perspective on this. Thanks for joining us here on PM Express. And Mr. Bentil, it's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
Are we going on the right track, really, for the president to, one, direct that Parliament should take a second look at these recommendations and approval from Parliament itself?
No, and worryingly so. For some of the reasons that have been already spoken about, the president knew about this. Why didn't he stop it? And why is he doing it now? It looks as if he's trying to posture in a certain populist way to make people believe that he indeed is concerned about the hikes in his salary. But look, I always say that I think our politicians sometimes underestimate the intelligence of even the average Ghanaian. So if you move from there to some people who may know more than the average Ghanaian, this is absolutely not on. The president cannot say he didn't know. And in fact, if he actually did not know, that is even worse. Okay, so the posturing at this point is what leaves a lot of worry. Why is the president doing that? Okay, and we need a president who is in touch, who is in charge, and who is clear about what he wants to do, not something where he lets float and then he looks at public reaction and then he quickly backpedals as if to say, well, I didn't know about this, but now I think we should, change something. So that is very worrying, and that also underlies the problem with the secrecy. The secrecy and the lack of transparency, behind shrouding all this. This has been 1 year in the making, all right? So why is it now coming up and then we have all these kinds of reactions from the executive? I don't think we're on the right track. We should be acting differently.
Right. Now, we are privileged to have exclusively the executive summary of the Irama Ade Committee report, and I'll take a little bite of it and then we'll continue with our discussion. In page 2, in a section where it talks about the, why it was constituted and consultations that were made, a portion says that the goal of these consultations was to solicit views on the possibility of linking salaries and other benefits of these office holders to performance of the national economy during the tenure of office. Don't you think that this is fair to consider the salaries and emoluments of the executive based on how well our economy is performing?
That is exactly what they should have done, and I've read that too. So I underlined that and said, well, if you are going to tag salaries to the performance of the economy, then a first-year economic student will say, take an economic parameter which goes up or down based on how well the economy is doing and tag the salary to it. So, for instance, we have made a simple suggestion and we will keep on making that suggestion forcefully until somebody tells us why it is wrong. Our view is as simple as this. From Green Street through Irama Ade and all the other Chinri Hesse, okay, each time we form a committee, they come up with something that creates an uproar. So it's a bad idea. We've been there 3 times. It's never worked. So we should change it. That's number one. Number two, the whole idea that, well, it is a committee which is independent, and they come up and set salaries for the president, and then the president also does what he will do for the parliamentarians. It's a farce, and we all know that. We know they are not really independent, okay? They are directed on what to do, okay? There are all kinds of communications between they and the executive and other, people, including parliament themselves. There's a lot of horse trading back and forth, and then they put up their report, which more or less is not independent work. We should stop those arguments. Nobody buys them anymore, all right? And the outcome, even if all these things, the processes were not as good, what is the outcome we've gotten over 12 years of trying? Negative, negative, negative. And each time a president comes up and says, okay, we are going to review this, they turn around and pay it. Okay, when something is not working, the way to do or the way to deal with that situation is to stop it. If they are going to live by this parameter, we have a simple suggestion, and this is it. Take the minimum wage. The minimum wage is set by a very independent group, not for the president or for parliamentarians, but for the rest of Ghanaians. And make the president's salary a multiple of the minimum wage. So after that, make it 50 times. So at 4.48 of minimum wage per day, multiply that by 50 and let that be the president's salary.
Per day?
Yes. All right? And if you multiply, you get something like 200 and something per day, it comes to something like 6,000 per month. Okay? Now, that is what will make their salary commensurate with the performance of the economy. Because what will happen is that if the economy goes down, inflation eats us all up, then it affects them. If it goes up and we are all happy, it affects them. So in effect, they connect themselves to one, our reality as Ghanaians. Number two, their own performance in the management of the economy. So we all rise or fall based on how well our leaders do. What we are seeing currently is a situation where they are opting out of the common reality of the average Ghanaian, which is usually the effect of bad governance. Why are Ghanaians in traffic today? Because roads are not being built. Why are we suffering through, our daily lives? Because you don't have water. Because the lights are going back and forth, all right? And what happens? If you take every particular problem that the average Ghanaian faces, the leaders of this country who are responsible for it have opted out. The average Ghanaian has a health problem. He goes to Kolebu. He has issues. Let a politician have a problem. They fly him out. The average Ghanaian has a water problem. He has to buy water, fetch water, all kinds of problems with water. The Ghana National Fire Service, and I'm saying this on record, the Ghana National Fire Service has been using state tankers, including sometimes fire tenders, to supply water to politicians, which is absolutely despicable because those things are very expensive. That is how they use our resources. Okay, take electricity. Give me one politician who doesn't have a generator in his house. And usually it will be funded one way or the other by the state. All right? Take traffic. We are all in traffic. We are all sweating in traffic. They just come with their riders and they breeze through the traffic. The people who break the law in this country, don't live by the rules in this country, are the people who are the custodians of the rules. So I expect that they will be part of the common reality of the average Ghanaian and not opt out, give themselves these fantastic salaries, not because they've earned it.
And the common reality is that the economic indicators are not too rosy.
Absolutely not right.
Right, let's hit the phone lines now and speak to Oseche Mensah Bonsu, Minority Leader in Parliament. Thanks very much, Honourable, for your time. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Right, so I want to ask you, did the President know of the deliberations that went on and subsequently the approval of this new salaries for the executive?
Well, say that we've had Parliament through leadership have had some engagements with the President for about certainly over a year ago. And there's been some, but I must say that the engagements have been with the President through the Chief of Staff. And the President at the time was President John Atamel, not President John Dramani Mahama. That is what I...
Right. So let me ask you, I mean, may his gentle soul rest in peace, but during the back and forth and negotiations and deliberations with the late president, what was his posturing? Did he sound like he agreed with the formula that was recommended by the Rama Ade committee?
Well, generally, I would say, generally, but there were a few areas that were discussed. There were some gaps between the president himself and his vice, between deputy ministers of parliament and so on. So we're trying to reconcile these figures and close the gaps in a few areas that have been the of the discussions that's going on. I would say that the current president, when we had occasion to have some discussions with him, said to us that unfortunately, discussions have been kept at the level of the president himself. So he, as a vice president, didn't know what had gone into it, that he was going to consult and confer.
So you would say that it is fair to assume that the current president didn't have much detailed knowledge about the deliberations and discussions that went into this. Let's establish that and then we'll continue.
I think you heard me right. I said to you that when we had occasion to meet him, that's what he told us. And I have no cause to disbelieve what he told us.
And so you would think, and so you would say that it is fair that he doesn't know much about it. I want to know.
My brother, what I've told you, what do you mean? That is what I've told you, that I'm quoting from him. And I think it is normal to make that deduction. So if you keep pushing and pushing, I don't know what it is that you're looking for.
Right.
But that is what he told us, that the discussion that we had with the chief of staff at the instance of the then president was kept at the level of the president. And he, as the vice president at the time, did not have much input into it. These are his words. And I'm saying that I have no cause to disbelieve what he told us. So if you want me to repeat myself, I don't know what is the essence.
Right.
But what I told you is what the president told us.
Right. So
he said he was going to, in fact, in my presence, he called the chief of staff and said to him, just before he left on the West African tour, that when he came back, he was going to engage the chief of staff to enable him know where they had gotten to, and thereafter get back to us in Parliament. These are the words of the president. So I think to be fair to him, I must say and tell you that this is what he told him.
Right,
but
sir.
Having then subsequently sent us the report, I would believe that would have conferred, as he said, with the chief of staff, and then come to some determination on the way forward, which is what he communicated to us.
Right, sir.
And then Parliament, as a body, also discussed the matter with respect to what we thought was right for the president, the chairman of the Council of State, the ministers, deputy ministers, and so on, and sent it back to the president. So that indeed has been what has gone on in Parliament and the presidency, if you like the presidency.
Right, sir. Honorable Sir Chairman Saboso, I'll have you hold, and then I also have on the line Rashid Pelpo, Deputy Majority Leader in Parliament, also joining us on the line for some more discussions on this. Thanks very much, sir, for your time. Well, I think we've lost him, and then we'll come back later and discuss. So, Mr. Bento, you heard him. You heard the minority leader saying the president, current president, obviously was not too much in the know of what was going on, and it's fair, right?
No, I heard him say that the president, the current president, reported to him that he was not in the loop when this was started, and he left it there. So I heard you push him on that particular issue to state categorically if the president said he was not aware, and he didn't commit to that. But the point then goes back to what did the president know? In the first place, he's suggesting that the president is suggesting that he didn't know. That's really not too good, all right? Number one, he's the vice president. The vice president really may not know everything, but that's what
right. Mr. Bento, I'll have you hold. Mr. Rashid Pelpo is back on so that we don't lose him. Good evening, and thanks for your time on PM Express, sir.
Thank you.
You've heard the arguments back and forth about the new salaries of the executives and the president's directive that Parliament should review this. Now, one of the critical questions is, how much did the president know beforehand, before this whole recommendation and approval became public? And if he did know, why is he now directing Parliament to review it?
Well, this is a question for the executive to answer. But I believe that the president may have good reason to give such a directive. And it's important for us to comply and wait and listen to him when he's back in Accra after his work.
Right. So, Mr. Purple, I'll have you hold. You said that it's necessary for you to wait and comply. I mean, Parliament is on recess, really. So what exactly can Parliament do under the circumstance? Is this not suggestive?
So, Parliament is not in the court of Parliament now. The principle is for the executive to determine the salaries and the conditions of service of members of Parliament. So it's the executive that determines that, and we determine theirs in accordance with the constitutional provisions. So at the moment, what the president may has done, I haven't heard it, maybe is to try to give meaning to try to appreciate exactly what is happening, what the public is saying, and all the comments.
Honorable Pelpo, let's get some proper education for the benefit of our viewers who might not exactly understand how salary deliberations and emolument discussions are done. You said that the executive determines the salaries and emoluments of the legislature. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And you also, that is, Parliament determines the salaries and emoluments of the presidency. That's also correct.
Yes.
So when Parliament approves and recommends a report of this nature, it is not in the power of the president to direct that that is changed. Can the president veto a decision of Parliament?
The president is the one who set up the commission to determine the salaries and the conditions of service of members of Parliament and the executive as well. And so in Article 71 of the Constitution, that is properly defined there. And it is in his bosom that the report comes. And when the report comes, he examines the report and then gives it out to these various institutional pieces of government to determine at each level and at what time, at what conditions or salaries that each of them can be pegged. And I'm saying that the president is the overall head of the state, and we know it's very obvious. He determines when to do something or not to do it. Now, I believe that he's the best person to explain to you why he has taken that decision. But I just think that when the president takes a decision, it's important for a moment to try to understand and appreciate the decision before we begin to act in any way that is appropriate.
Right. Is the timing of the president's decision not suggestive that he's possibly politically massaging the issue, as such a thing could be very volatile in damping the party's visibility, the NDC and government's visibility going into the elections? And that, I mean, it's fair to assume that the president made this directive considering this, and that if he doesn't, then he might become popular throughout to election day. You don't think so?
You know, I think that the media and all of us have a responsibility to educate the public and let them understand one very important and basic thing. We have a determination to ensure that we have a democracy in this country. And salaries and conditions of service are definitely going to be different from any ordinary person, because you can't have an executive that is prone to corruption, that is malleable and can be dealt, and can be changed. The minds and hearts can be changed by any single individual. Let me tell you, as I'm talking to you now, the salaries of members of parliament of Uganda, a member of parliament earn more than our president. In Kenya, a member of parliament can earn twice more than our president. And so anything people are talking about, I have heard people converting the 12,000 to 120 million old Ghana cedis, and they say president is earning so much and all that and all that. These are all things that we believe are because people don't understand the system we are operating. We are operating a system that will ensure that we have a president who can definitely be given emoluments and conditions of service that can let him not be subjected to the influence of ordinary people. The problem we are facing now is for our people to understand the situation we find ourselves. Somebody will say, but the economies of the others are better than us. Neighboring Burkina Faso, the member of parliament in Burkina Faso, in all the sub-regions, Ghanaian MP earns less than all of them. We earn the least. I mean, what then is happening to Ghana? Is it that we are the most miserable people?
Right.
We are the least developed country? We have the weakest economy? Or what is happening?
Right, Mr. Popo, yes, sir. You can finish your statement, sir.
Yeah, I think that there's a gap between exactly what the reality is and the need for us to feel it by explaining to the people and the public indeed what is happening and the need for us to ensure that we have a strong, viable presidency, executive, and the legislature.
Right, Mr. Popo, I'll have you hold, and then we'll come back to the studio and we'll do more discussions. And we'll later come back to you, sir. We'll be grateful if you keep on the line. Thanks very much, sir. Right, so, Mr. Bento,
yeah,
here we are. I heard him say some very new things which we haven't discussed in this. He compared the emoluments and salaries to Uganda and Kenya, and saying that Kenya pays Kenyan parliamentarians get 2 times what the president of Ghana gets. Mm-hmm. And so he says that we must consider the situation we find ourselves and also the reality. Now, I go back to the methodology that the Rama Committee used, and at the bottom there said, studied practices in other countries. Is it not fair for us as a country to compare how much our executive earns to maybe the sub-region, even if we're not looking at the United States or developed countries like Europe?
Well, good question, and this is how I answer this question. Kenya and Uganda, and to some extent, some of those other countries where you have fantastic rates for their parliamentarians, are the laughing stock of the world. I have been in various places around the world where these are used as examples of quote-unquote, pardon my language, African stupidity, where you have a politician and so many multiples of what the average person earns. And we've all cited these examples and laughed at these people for being absurd. Who has not laughed at the Kenyan situation? All right? And I believe you know some of these things. Why is Ghana touted as an example of good governance and democracy in the sub-region and Africa as a whole? Because we don't do some of these things. Okay? You cannot remove yourself from the reality of the environment around you and go compare yourself to somebody who is acting absurdly, okay, in a way that others have described as stupidity, okay, and say because of that we should do this. All right, do we want to be Burkina Faso? Burkina Faso is run by a dictator. Okay, I'm not a politician. I don't have to deal with international relations issues. I'm an analyst and I have to speak things as they are. Do you want Ghana to go that way? Some people believe that he's doing that so he keeps his politicians quiet. Okay, so those are
so
very
give us a better
bad
understanding
examples
of the situation in Kenya and the situation in Burkina Faso, for example, which we shouldn't try to emulate at all, which you're suggesting is
you
very
have a
bad
situation in
for
Kenya
us
where
to-
they are
to
earning
compare
about
with.
$10,000+ a month, and they have all kinds of very fantastic allowances, which are totally removed from the reality of their performance and the performance of their economy. And we know what happened in Kenya. They almost ended up in a civil war. They ended up in some kind of a coalition government. And this man is rubbing this man's back, and this man is rubbing this man's back. I was in a conference in Germany where the Kenyan example was given as the worst example possible. okay, where you have a situation where the opposition has to go in and constitute a proper voice against the excesses of government. The opposition has joined government and they are both corrupt. That was what was said. This is how people view Africa. And these are the reasons why people view Africa these ways, which is why Ghana is always cited as an example of, proper governance, at least better than the rest of us. All right. So it really saddens me when I hear our politicians remove themselves from our reality, just forget about the fact that we are actually getting credit for behaving properly. And then when it comes to salaries, we want to be compared with other people in places where they are being laughed at. And if you go into the other places like, the developed countries who we take aid from, go and check what the perks of an average British MP is, or in Netherlands or in Sweden or in Norway where they are very rich, all right? And you'll be surprised. You will be surprised. So, if we are going to compare, as the summary says, studied practices in other countries, we should be studying best practices. We should be looking ahead and going forward in the right direction, not looking at the worst examples within our continent, which is considered the worst of the West, okay, and try to emulate those.
Mr. Bento, tell me, we'll go on a snappy break, but I want to hear a quick answer, yes or no, if you can possibly. This directive from the president, it will amount to nothing. Express. And tonight we're discussing the executive salary review. We're brainstorming on whether the directive by the president to review the salary is just a mere window dressing and political rhetoric which will amount to nothing at the end of the day. We've heard from Rashid Pelpo, his deputy majority leader in parliament, and also the minority leader, Oseche Mensah-Bonsu. So he's still on the line. So we'll go back on the line now and speak to Oseche Mensah-Bonsu, minority leader. Thanks for still holding on.
There, marathon, hold on.
We are grateful for your time. Now, one of the issues that have come forward is that Parliament, in making the decision, altered the original recommendations of the Irama Ade Commission. They actually upped the amounts or points that were suggested by that report. Is that true?
The Parliament did what?
Parliament altered the original recommendations from Irama Ade to move it up, like, up the figures. I want to find out if that is true.
The points that were awarded to the president in the Irama committee report, they spoke about 10 points. It's the same 10 points that they retained.
100 points, sir. 100 points reference to the president, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
The same point. The same 100 points.
Yes, sir.
It wasn't moved up.
Okay, so
let me quickly correct. You spoke to me about the initial reaction.
Yes, sir.
And I told you about the president, what he told us when we met him. And he said to us that he was going to consult the chief of staff upon his return from the West African tour. Now, after it came to Parliament, I think it is safe to conclude that the president would have done his consultation with the chief of staff. And so he will be sufficiently briefed before sending the report. But having said that, I think that it's important for all of us to acknowledge. I don't want to go into the rest of the sub-region. But even in the country called Ghana, there are many people in charge of state enterprises who, at the moment, earn about 2-3 times the salary of the people. I would think that the best thing to do, we should be realistic. Admittedly, we should look at the economy. We should look at strength of the economy to bear whatever further impositions that we put on the economy. At the same time, we should also look at reconciling what obtains in the system. We cannot play the ostrich. It cannot, for me, I think it's right to have a managing director of a state enterprise who has not as many or as much responsibilities as the president, and about 2-3 times that of the president. You know, right? And I think we should be looking at all these things in comprehensively to arrive at something that we will say is equitable.
Right. So,
yes, sir. That what Parliament has decided on is sacrosanct. I think we can look at the bigger picture and see what is best for us.
Right. So,
said,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The point that we made about the president's recommendation, what the president is telling Parliament to do. My colleague was attempting a response. I think Article 106(8) is clear on the way forward. The president, in this matter, cannot veto what Parliament says. In the case of the passing of bill, what the president could do is, as Article 106 clause 7, he could say to us that, well, I disagree with you on these conclusions. Can you look at it again? Parliament, they look at it again. And perhaps say that, okay, we also believe that we are sending it back to us may not be right. And Parliament will require 2/3 of the vote to rather veto the proposals of the President. And Article 106(10 of the Constitution provides that once Parliament comes to that determination and conclusion, the President shall assent to that new position of Parliament. The President cannot veto it.
So it does really mean, Honourable, that under the circumstance, looking at the fact that we are a few weeks or months to the end of the term of this Parliament, it means this directive wouldn't get a very good attention from Parliament itself in compliance with 106(8), 106(7), 106(10), and all of the references you've made. Parliament is not likely to take a decision on this before the close of the term, right?
As we watch, anyway, it's like Parliament is not going to look at what they are saying. I'm only drawing attention to the relevant provisions in the Constitution.
Right.
Because my colleague was attempting an answer, and I thought that he wasn't getting the very
okay. All right. Fair enough with the clarification. Now, let's get back to the substantive issue of the points that were awarded. Now, in the report of which we have the executive summary, the president was supposed to, well, the president is the reference point where he is giving 100 points, 100 award points. He was then set aside as an anchor or reference point for all the other office holders. The Vice President, Speaker of Parliament and the Chief Justice were considered next and giving award points relative to that of the President. Now, my question really is, in determining how much in money terms the President gets, how did you work out 100 to equal 12,000 Ghana cedis and 75 points of the Vice President to equal 9,000? Maybe a little clarification there will rest our minds, sir.
First of all, unfortunately, I find myself in Kumasi now.
Yes, sir.
And apart from the Constitution that I have in my car, I don't have any other, tool in my hand to refer to. Unfortunately,
right, sir.
I don't have the Arama Committee report with me. And even the extract that we made for members of Parliament, I don't have it with me.
Yes, sir. That's fair, sir.
I'm able to talk to the specific issue, except to say that we are set, as per Article 108, that the President, in giving that directive, would point to the specific area. Now, it is general consideration. What are the specific areas that he wants us to look at? And what are his recommendations? Because obligations imposed on him by Article 106(8), clause 8 of the Constitution. And then Parliament will then look at them. We cannot speak to generalities. We will speak to specifics. So when it comes, I guess, against the backdrop of the Rama Committee's report itself and the recommendations of Parliament, we then can begin to focus attention in the specific areas that will draw our attention.
Right, thank you very much, sir. I'll get back to Honourable Rashid Pelpo to get some more clarification on this. Thanks, sir, for holding on. Good evening, Honourable Rashid Pelpo, and thanks for holding on, sir.
Right. Thanks.
Yes, sir. And I put the question to Honorable Oseche Mensah-Bonsu about how the money in quantum terms was arrived at in reference to the award points. The president has been awarded 100 points, which is the reference point, and he gets 12,000 Ghana cedis. And then the vice president has been awarded award points 75, and he gets 9,000. What calculations went into this, and how did this arrive?
Well, this is a very technical question, and this is a decision that can be answered by those who worked on the report. I mean, on the commission's report. But essentially, they really don't mean much. Whether 100 points or 75 points or 90 points or whatever, it doesn't mean much.
You mean it doesn't mean much? That's serious. I mean, if it doesn't mean much, then they couldn't just have arrived at the figure by just guesswork, right?
What it translates into is what matters, you know. I mean, if we talk about somebody having 100 points or 20 points, they won't understand exactly what is happening. What that translates into is what matters. And I'm surprised that the gentleman, I didn't catch the debate, and so I don't know my other colleague who is suggesting that it is too much and we shouldn't compare ourselves to Kenya or Uganda.
Mr. Kofi Bentil from Imani, Ghana.
Okay, yeah. I have a lot of respect for Imani, but I try to help. I think that it's important for them to go deep into this matter before they make public statements about it. You see, we are not comparing ourselves to Uganda, and we are not comparing ourselves to Kenya. We are drawing examples and seeing that we are still as humble, and we are still believing that we don't have to spend this much as much as they are spending. It's not a comparison at all. There's no comparison. I'm only talking about a member of parliament in Uganda who earns as much as our president, a member of parliament in Kenya who earns twice as much, and they even sometimes tell us that their economies are better. You know,
but that's what he said, that these countries and their economies and the comparisons are not exactly best practices from these countries. No, these countries haven't done too well, like Ghana has, right?
We are not talking about comparison here. We are drawing examples. And if you want to compare yourself to Kenya, then I would have been saying that the president should earn about $20,000. You see, that's comparison. Saying that while they are up there, we are down there. And this is in recognition of the fact that we have an economy that we want to grow, and we are doing a lot of sacrifices. It is the true situation I'm talking about. When you come down home, we are all here in Ghana, when we know of MDs who earn 3 times what the president is earning. We know of GVC, for example, that earns more than twice what the president is earning. We know of some, maybe Graphic, which earns more than what the president is earning, several other MDs, you know. So I think that they have to do some in-depth study.
Right, so Honorable Pepro, may I ask you, honestly, do you think that the president's directive to Parliament to take a second look at this will amount to anything, looking at the timing we have to elections and the timing before the House rises?
Whether it will mean anything, yes, it will mean something, because maybe the complaints coming from the public and the misinformation going on, misrepresentation of issues going on, would then have begin to reshape their thinking. Well, the president has listened to the public. He wants to make a meaning of what they are talking about. And for the meantime, he says, stop it, and let's see what happens next. So I think that step is important, because you need to feel the pulse of your people. You need to be a listening person. And I think that's the role he's playing.
So really, honestly, I mean, did the president have to wait for all this public outcry and backlash over this before coming out with this directive? Shouldn't this directive have come out long ago?
That is what I want. It's important for us to all understand. The president did not sit down one day and get up and say that he's going to earn X, or MPs are going to X, Y, and Y. There is a constitutional provision that says you should set up a committee. The committee will look at certain conditions. It will look at some variables and conditions of service to members of parliament, and then to the executive for us to look at, examine, and approve variously.
Right. So,
and so this commission report, there's no precedent that any president has thrown away the reports. In the last regime, the president looked at it, and then, he tried to implement the report. And I know that we ran into some problems when we were talking about housing and all that, and the president getting 2 houses,
right,
getting this is too much and all that. So there is no precedent that we have a commission set up by the president. We spend money on it. It presents its report and says, President, you are earning this. And then the president says, no, and throws it away. I mean, he gives it back to the legislature. We examine it in comparative, look at a comparative view of it, considering the terrain, the economic terrain of our country, and then draw examples elsewhere, and then either accept it or reject it. Now, the representatives of the people think that this is logical. And then I'm saying that once we approve it and think is good for the president, we should criticize it if it is an overly estimation of what the president should.
Right, Honorable Purple, quickly.
I'm saying
yes,
you
sir.
don't have to do. You should do that from an informed position. Looking at the sub-region, Ghana is still the lowest when we come to paying our politicians.
Yeah, Honorable, I've heard all that argument, but honestly, I mean, when the Irama Ade Committee made the recommendation and put the president's award point at 100, did they attach any amount in quantum terms to that 100 points?
No, but if 100 is equal to the 12,000 you are talking about, it means 100 is 12,000. So you don't talk about 100, you just say 12,000.
How do you know 100 is 12,000? That's the maths that we've been trying to work out, really.
Oh, so you don't know how much the president is earning.
Well, I mean, that's in the report. And you are saying that 100 is equal to 12,000. So we should just take it at that base level and use for the calculation.
No, you yourself talked about 12,000. Everybody's talking about 12,000. And we all hear radio stations saying that the president is...
Well, I'm not talking about 12,000. It's the report that I have, the executive summary of the report, that puts it that way.
Yeah, so that's the report. You are now giving the impression that I'm saying 12,000.
No. What I'm saying, Honorable, I beg your pardon, Honorable. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to establish how the amount, the quantum of 12,000 was arrived at when the Irama Ade Committee recommended 100 award points. So I'm saying
I don't think we are the best people to answer that.
Okay.
But I think that we should be satisfied that they are saying 100 is 12,000. And if people are questioning the 12,000, we should be responding to that.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Honorable Purple is Deputy Majority Leader of Parliament. Mr. Bento, we've had very interesting discussions with the honorables from Parliament, and you had some interesting comments. Your reactions?
A number of things to clarify. I've heard many times the comparison made between the president and certain people who are running state enterprises, for instance.
Like Graphic Corporation?
Yes, we've looked at that.
Group.
Now, it is a very bad comparison. It's like comparing apples and gravel.
Why? Why is it a bad
Because
comparison?
one, when you are running a commercial entity, you are dealing with something called competitor parity. Okay? You are not looking at it in terms of the president being the chief executive of the state. So if it's a state-run organization, then it means you must earn less than the president. We've tried that in this country before. That is why we let civil servants run hotels. Okay? And that is how we ended up getting the Continental Hotel with lizards running in the lobby. All right? And it all ground down to a halt. And that is how we have the Kumasi City Hotel grinding down to a halt. Today, what have we done? We've given it back. Hotels. Yeah. Now, people make comparisons of Labadi Beach Hotel, which is owned by SNAID, which is also a government entity, and therefore, the person there is earning multiples of what the president is earning. That is anomalous. That is absolutely not anomalous. Why? Because you are running a 5-star hotel, and in competitive parity, you have to run it just like any other 5-star hotel. If the government does not want to run businesses, it should get out of business. But you can't set up a 5-star hotel with state money and then let a civil servant run it. We've tried it in this country before. We just wasted our money. The case of GBC is an anomaly. Look, if you talk about competitive parity with GBC, you have to ask yourself, what is the chief executive of Joy FM or Multimedia earning? And how does that compare with GBC's chief executive? And then you compare their outputs. So if GBC is not producing what they must be producing, then their director general should not be earning as much as he is earning. So in fact, that comparison of commercial entities against the president is very anomalous. And again, if you look at the best practices that they are talking about and comparing with, okay, whether in the US or in the sub-region, everywhere you go where state runs commercial entities, the commercial entities are run according to competitive parity principles. So the people who run them usually will be paid analogous pay according to what reigns in that industry. If you can't do that, just divest the private entity and let it go. Now, we need to be clear, therefore, that we should not be making those comparisons. Even in state business, there are special products. For instance, if you take the US, there are special projects in the White House, in the CIA, in the Pentagon, where the heads of those projects earn multiples of what the president earns. Okay? And there is no problem with that because it's a special project. So you can have a situation where the next government comes in and says that, oh, free SHS, so they are going to appoint a special project team to head, and they are not going to be paid like civil servants. Because if you subject that thing to civil servant rates and civil servant ways of doing business, nothing is going to happen. So we need to get this clear. You can't compare the way people who run commercial entities, whether they are owned by the state or not, are paid, to how the president is paid. In every country, that is the truth. If you go to the US, the people who run the government agencies, even the mortgage firms and what, they earn millions, and the president does not earn that much money. So that should be put to rest very, very quickly. And I need to just go on.
Yes, sir.
In all these discussions and all the things that are being said, we should appreciate that, look, these are people who are running a country, and their decisions will have an effect on this country. All right? You have a situation where this year alone, we've seen judgment debts paid. Judgment debts being paid was a direct result of either complicit, collusion or incompetence of leaders. And what that does, after all that has gone on, plus all these raises, that you are going to create a situation where people who work are going to have very high demands. If the government can pay so much money, if the leaders can take so much money in their salary, then I also deserve so much money. Now, if we have to fulfill all those desires, we are going to run our economy down because inflation is going to go back to pre-1979 times, and we are going to have revolutions in this country again.
Mr.
Let me round up on
you
this one.
Yeah.
Look, we are talking about pegging people's salaries to productivity. And today, we don't see our politicians peg their salaries to their productivity. So we are simply removing that principle from our body politic. And again, it's going to affect wage negotiations in this country. And the repercussions are going to be dire. So I'm asking our leaders to think very hard and think again.
Right, we'll take a deeper analysis into these repercussions when we return from the break. I have some of your messages which I'll gladly read quickly, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. This one from Chelsea, Ghana. He says, the president has really demonstrated that he loves Ghana and will also serve her in a good faith without being materialistic. And then this one doesn't have a name, but it says, I must confess that I personally admire the courage, boldness, and above all, passion with which Mr. Kofi Bentil is speaking on the matter. That, for me, is a demonstration of his like-mindedness and high sense of national patriotism, which is worthy of commendation and emulation. No wonder Imani is making positive impact on the current generation and beyond. Good evening. And then Awal Ishaku Kanewu says, the presidential directive on latest emoluments of the executive is a total smack of President Mahama's indecisiveness on critical national issues such as this current subject. How do you endorse a document and forward it to Parliament for consideration and approval, and now turn around to call for its review at a time it has been made public? Let's face it, the quantum is grossly outrageous, hence requires second look. The president will have to come clear on the matter because it looks like his usual populist position on very important national issues. Good evening. But Awal, you had the MP saying that Honorable Osechi Mensah is saying that the president told him that he wasn't much in the know of the details of this deliberation, so it's fair for him to accord him that trust and respect. Nana Aban Mensah says former President Mills had done this before, and it's just that President Mahama is following his step. I believe it will not change if President Mahama wins the elections. It's a right direction the president has taken. And then this one from Keja Bright Boedu says that I think this is a clear use of intellectual dishonesty. The salary of a teacher reduced for no reasons and some recklessness. And he says politicians are justifying it. I had 37 Ghana cedis as gross salary and still they want us to believe all is well. And Simon Kweku Kofiga says one question we are asking is what parameters added up to the pay rise of our executive and legislature. I'm sure when we get good and enough education into the pay rise, we will be comfortable. Do our leaders really deserve the pay rise? What level are our executive and legislature with respect to salaries? Shouldn't our executive and legislature be on the single spine salary structure as suggested by some? And this one from Joe Debra says that, please, can you tell us how much each was taking before the increment? So, Mr. Bento, you had some of these snappy comments. Someone wants to know possibly what the executives were earning before. Is there such a huge gap between what they were earning before and what they're supposed to be earning now? Yeah,
there's a huge gap. I'm trying to remember the figures. I should have gotten them before coming. I think President Kufuor was earning something like 4,000.
Right.
Okay. And it hasn't changed much. But the truth is this. Frankly speaking, the real problem is not even the quantum they award themselves.
What is it?
That is a moral issue. The quantum they award themselves is a moral issue. The real issue is the processes and the mechanisms and the transparency with which they do these things.
You think the president should speak to this very soon?
The president should speak
to it. Full
disclosure
is critical for you,
Full disclosure should not come from the president. If you read the Rama Adi thing, they are saying that, look, we must have a situation where these things are automatically adjusted regularly over time. In other words, it means we have to set up a mechanism which works with time without people tweaking it. Why? Because if you set ad hoc committees to come in once every 4 years or so to do these things, we'll get the problems we have gotten. And I've cited the history of this thing.
Yeah.
Shinri Hesse, Green Street, Irama Adi. Each time, same problem. Okay. And if you talk about automatic adjustment, and also the Irama Adi thing has said something, and this is a principle that has run through each of the epochs that we've gone through, that the performance must be relevant to the pay. That's one. The best determinant of the leader's performance, one of the best, is economic performance. And you will see scattered around here that we must tie it to economic performance. Also, from an analyst point of view, I think it must be tied to the general fortunes of the people in the country. Okay, so it comes down to one thing. Make it automatic, tie it to performance. You must hook it to an economic parameter. So that as that economic parameter moves, okay, the salaries move with it. All right? And so if these are the principles that we want to use, why can't we use GDP? And it's been stated somewhere here. You will see it somewhere there. Or I prefer we use the minimum wage because that's what most
Or somebody suggested single spine. Put them on a single spine.
Fine, put them on a single spine. But, you know, I mean, there are all kinds of
graded
ways to do
single
it.
spine.
But the point is that it must be a mechanism that goes up and down automatically so that people don't have to come in and tweak it. Because like I've said in the beginning, it's an illusion that these people work independently. They are guided, okay, and there's all kinds of horse trading going on, so we will not believe it. So it is important that the process be well set and then be made absolutely transparent. The opacity of this process, the secrecy with which it is shrouded, raises the suspicion that something untoward is going on. And it's true, something untoward is going on, which is why the president cannot defend this. And the parliamentarians themselves are at, a loss trying to defend it. Okay, so look, bottom line, for me, if the president merits it, he should earn as much as he should earn. But then whether he merits it or not will be clear in his performance within the state and depending on what he's doing. I can cite various examples of constant errors. Okay, I've just cited the Woyome case, and there are so many other cases involving judgment debt. Okay, when did we get around to sorting out the issue of the Gang of Four roads? All right, these things have been hanging around for 4 years. We danced around them, and Ghanaians went through hell, traveling through traffic. There were children that are waking up at 4 a.m., they eat breakfast in their cars. Okay, the water situation has not gotten better. And like I keep saying, the politicians who have to lead opt out by awarding themselves all kinds of perks and things. So the point is this, we are not seeing a situation where performance matches these things, and which is why they can't make it transparent. Because if they made it transparent, we'll have problems. It is not so much the quantum, it is the process and the morality of the things that they award themselves, which in effect means that they opt out of our common reality. And it's not right or becoming for leaders to do those things.
Right. My name is Stephen Enti, and I have been engaged tonight in the studio by Kofi Bento, who is Deputy Director of Imani Ghana, and Rashid Pelpo also joined us on the telephone. He's Deputy Majority Leader. Oseche Mensa Bonsu, who is Minority Leader, also joined us. And you also, thanks very much for your comments and texts. My name is Stephen Enti, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion. Join us again tomorrow for another interesting edition of PM Express. Good night. Constituency Watch follows right after.